Welcome to the Aero Export Consultants Podcast. I'm John Young, and this is The Point. Today I want to go over some interesting articles about recent changes made to the Missile Technology Control Regime, or the MTCR, and let that lead us into a broader discussion about relaxing trade restrictions in order to foster industrial growth with our allies. We're seeing inklings of this in our other trade relationships, such as recently established AUKUS, and I think it's worth discussing in further detail, so let's just jump in. What is the MTCR, for those who are unfamiliar? The State Department defines the Missile Technology Control Regime as an informal political understanding among states that seek to limit the proliferation of missiles and missile technology. It was formed back in 1987 by the G7 countries and currently consists of 35 member countries. It was originally created to address the increasing proliferation of nuclear weapons by addressing the missile aspect or the delivery mechanism. It was later expanded to focus on all types of WMDs that relied on missile delivery. As the State Department says, proliferation of these weapons, quote, has been identified as a threat to international peace and security. One way to counter this threat is to maintain vigilance over the transfer of missile equipment, material, and related technologies usable for systems capable of delivering WMDs. Through export controls aimed at technologies that contribute to delivery systems, meetings between MTCR partners, and continued dialogue and outreach, the MTCR aims to achieve its objective. It is this continued dialogue that brings us our story today. In the final days of the Biden administration, a new U.S. policy guidance for implementing the MTCR was announced. As a non-binding regime with no shared set of rules, the MTCR relies on guidelines and the member countries' own export control regimes to effectively police themselves. The Biden administration's announcement signaled a new direction for the U.S. in our efforts to end illicit proliferation while, quote, advancing the president's goals of strengthening allied defense capabilities, bolstering the U.S. defense industrial base, streamlining defense trade, and deterring adversaries. The U.S. is also working to ensure the MTCR regime, quote, keeps pace with the evolution in missile technology and prevents the transfer of technologies that would threaten the United States, allies, partners, and other countries in the world. As technology evolves, so too must our regulations in order to maintain a proper defense of our country, our national interests, and our industrial base. In this episode, I want to go over the changes in direction for our regulations, as well as the international cooperation that can emerge as a result of those policy shifts, because that is the area where our manufacturers and exporters will see the most impact. Overall, the National Security Memorandum put out by the departing Biden administration, quote, directs the interagency to provide increased flexibility for case-by-case review and facilitate support for certain MTCR Category 1 missiles, unmanned aerial systems, or UAS, and space launch vehicles, SLV, systems to certain partners with strong export control systems. As reported by the Aerospace Project for the Center for Strategic and International Studies, it also establishes that, quote, transfers of MTCR Category 1 space launch vehicle-related commodities, software, and technology will be considered on a case-by-case basis for select and vetted partner space programs and participation in international space programs, whether such programs are governmental or commercial in nature. Category 1 systems include, among other things, complete rocket systems and complete unmanned aerial vehicle systems. So the important language to take note of is the Biden administration directed the agencies to facilitate more trade options with these technologies to certain partners we believe have strong export control systems. Language is important, and so is history in these types of transactions. According to Van H. Van Diepen, a former Assistant Secretary of State for International Security and Non-Proliferation, the United States' previous policy of trade in these technologies was much stricter, declining to encourage MTCR member countries' missile and SLV programs that the U.S. did not support prior to the formation of the MTCR. As a result, the support was geared mostly towards the UK and French militaries for missile programs and the European Space Agency and Japanese SLV programs. This new attitude will greatly expand the United States' trading pool in these areas where we had previously been hesitant to trade in. Indeed, during the period of time where the United States generally refused to engage in meaningful cooperation, we acted alone in some regards. CSIS reports that placed us in a strategic disadvantage that did not meaningfully advance U.S. non-proliferation objectives. One of the negative consequences of this stance was an allied reliance on Russian suppliers for space technologies. In their analysis of the policy shift, CSIS said the following, quote, January's policy shift, therefore, should be viewed not as watering down the MTCR, but but rather as expanding the ability of the United States to benefit from technology transfer to and among its close allies and partners amidst the increase of defense technology and capability trade among adversarial nations. CSIS also predicts that this shift will work to revitalize aspects of the U.S. defense industrial base, which has lagged behind in recent years due to a multitude of problems. Russia's invasion of Ukraine and our responding support to Ukraine has drained several of our arms stores and has revealed problems in our own supply chains and production capability to refill our armories. As CSIS puts it, our invasion response has, quote, revealed clear shortfalls in the U.S. defense industrial base, ranging from inadequate production capacity, example with regards to solid rocket motors and artillery shells, the lack of a secure supply chain for critical minerals and other inputs needed to fuel such production, and inadequate magazine depth for a wide range of systems both domestically and among our allies. This all tells us that something needs to be done. The only question is how we go about it. Right now, this policy shift appears to be the current path the United States is heading down, though we should keep in mind that this shift was implemented during the last days of the Biden administration, and 3 months into the Trump administration, the international landscape is already in a different place, with different objectives taking center stage. And this new shift is not without criticism. Van Diepen has criticisms for the policy change, bringing our history back into the discussion. According to him, quote, the MTCR and U.S. missile non-proliferation policy have traditionally treated ballistic missiles and SLVs as essentially interchangeable, subjecting them to the same basic rules. This has been a bedrock of Western opposition to SLV programs in Iran, North Korea, and other proliferant states. By now permitting U.S. exports to certain non-MTCR country SLV programs, but continuing to ban them to such countries' Category 1 military missile programs, the updated policy undermines the interchangeability argument and the United States' ability to get other countries to oppose proliferant SLV programs. In other words, by relaxing standards, we risk countries abusing our new policy shift to benefit their missile programs by operating through their space programs, which are less restricted. This does not even have to be our direct trading partners to be detrimental. If countries we do business with alter their practices due to our change in policy, they might ease restrictions for countries we would normally never do so with. Van Diepen ends his article by saying that this new policy direction, quote, will badly undercut the U.S. missile, UAV, and SLV industries by allowing exports that support indigenous foreign competitors. At the same time, these relaxations make it harder for the United States to prevent other countries from taking the same national discretion approach and making missile-related exports to present and future U.S. adversaries who are their friends, especially in the guise of SLV-related technology. Now, CSIS disagrees with this negative take and instead has a favorable impression of the policy shift, though they do make sure to say that, quote, a policy is only as good as its implementation. And that ultimately is where I want to transition this conversation to, implementation. Because this shift in our stance on the MTCR comes at the end of a long line of decisions made by the Biden administration to foster trade relationships with our allies. Trade with other countries is a delicate balancing act of several different factors. On one hand, we have national security and the need to protect our country and its interests, including economic. On the other hand, we have the need to compromise and foster healthy trade relationships with allies. In a government era where we are prioritizing American success overall, it's important to remember that trade is a two-way street. The government's plan in recent years to walk this fine line appears to be creating and strengthening trade partnerships with trusted allies. AUKUS is one example of such a partnership, one that has large impacts on trade and export controls with two allied countries. AUKUS is directly mentioned in both the White House statement and the analysis by CSIS in regards to the recent MTCR policy shift, saying, quote, these policy changes will help the United States advance shared defensive objectives with close allies, including the implementation of AUKUS, while maintaining a strong leadership role on the non-proliferation and export control policy. The reason being is that this shift is seen as another step towards creating pockets of less restricted trade with close allies in order to benefit American security and industry. For security, it increases partnerships for military and high-tech products that inevitably benefit American forces. With better weapons and closer ties to allies, we secure our country and our interests. These types of agreements and policy shifts also increase our defense industrial base at home, ensuring that new products are being made at home and that America's arsenal is fully equipped. As CSIS explains, these macro policies represent a, quote, shift towards a deeper integration with the Allied defense base, and that these shifts can empower us by, quote, enabling greater burden sharing by allies in areas such as expanded license production of U.S. systems, co-development and co-production, as well as supporting allies' efforts to develop their own capabilities via greater purchases of U.S. defense exports. In addition to expanding the defense industrial base at home, these shifts can also expand to encompass more aspects of our domestic industry, allowing for the ease of trade in more areas. When we lessen trade restrictions, as we have done with allies like Canada, the UK, and Australia, we create opportunities for American businesses to engage in meaningful and profitable trade, productive trade, as it were. The key, as I said before, is implementation. Who are the allies we need to forge relationships with? What are the deals that will bring most profit to Americans, but are also viable enough to be accepted by our allies? The new administration is ushering in an American First agenda, where we prioritize ourselves over our allies and especially over our adversaries. Individual countries should of course prioritize themselves and their citizens, but no country can stand alone in this modern age. Going forward, it will be interesting to see what direction the Trump administration takes. Currently, they are making big waves with big changes, but many of these relationship-forging partnerships are still in place and show no sign currently of being abandoned. We are still maintaining AUKUS. We continue to push heavily against China in high-tech fields with our partnerships in areas such as semiconductors, and we are rapidly returning towards high-energy production in areas such as LNG exports, which will undoubtedly tie us to several of our allies. But as I said, a productive economy cannot stand alone in today's age. If we are to continue to exert pressure on our adversaries in economic and military avenues, we will need to have a strong industrial base, strong trade ties with allies in relevant high-tech and military fields, and strong friendship with those strategic allies. It is up to the government to facilitate these objectives on the macro level. For industry, we just need to continue as we've always done and make the best out of the circumstances we have. If opportunities open up, that is all the better for us. But until then, we need to conduct business securely and profitably to ensure we continue to do our part in bringing forth America's and our own prosperity. Happy hunting, folks. And remember, for all your questions and export compliance needs, contact us here at Aero Export Consultants. Research done right, compliance made simple. I'm John Young, and this has been The Point.